Hi guys, and welcome back to yet another video. My name is Angie and I'm really glad you're here. Today we're going to be talking about workplace boundaries. Whether you need to set those boundaries, you need to strengthen the boundaries that you have, or you just need to grow in your ability to set boundaries. I've got a number of questions from people over the last 2-3 months in this season of COVID-19 who have been working from home and are feeling like their bosses are like pushing or encroaching in their space, and they're not being able to say no because the boss is sending an email at 10, is calling on Saturdays, on Sundays, and they're like, oh my God, help us. And I have been sharing a couple of messages with people about boundaries and how to do that. And today I want to expand that. So it's not just about the COVID-19 season, but it's how to place or how to create or how to strengthen your workplace boundaries. A boundary is a limit that defines a relationship that you have with a person or a thing, okay? So it's how you operate within a particular space, or how a thing or a person operates with you. And with boundaries, you can have two extremes. One extreme can be a weak boundary or a porous boundary, which, you know, can be broken, or it's very easy, it's very loose. And on the other end, you can have a boundary that is very rigid. It's very hard, like, you know, just like it has to be this way and we can't change. But a healthy place of boundaries is somewhere in between. Obviously there's no like dead center, but somewhere in between where you have control, you feel like you have control over what happens to you and things that relate to you, but it's also flexible enough that can change depending on the situation, depending on circumstances. So say for example you don't work on weekends, and that's a boundary that you have. We'll talk about a bit more about the boundaries, but let's say you don't work on weekends, but towards the end of the month or towards a particular part of the month or a particular time of the year, because it's all hands on deck and things are going chaotic in the organization, then on some Saturdays, only in that particular time, because of extenuating circumstances, you then work on the weekends. And so that's a flexible boundary, because it's not like, okay, I can never work on a Saturday. You know, it's more like I don't work on Saturdays, and it's a hard and fast rule. However, you are able to adapt and change to what the needs of the organization are. So I want to talk about 5 things that you can do to begin to establish those boundaries, or for you to go back to figure out, okay, are my boundaries working? Do I need to strengthen them, or what else do I need to do? Number 1 is identifying your limits. What are your boundaries? What makes you tick? You need to spend quite a bit of time in self-reflection, and you need to be self-aware. You need to grow in self-awareness. The better self-aware you are, the more likely you are not to have boundaries that are porous and not to be pushed over because you do have established boundaries. So you need to spend a lot of time with yourself and define, what are my work boundaries? What are my spiritual boundaries? My mental boundaries? My emotional boundaries? This word is becoming hard in my mouth. Your emotional boundaries. Another thing that you can do, which will enable you to have some cues, is looking at situations where you are stressed or uncomfortable. So does a certain way that somebody touches you in the office, does that make you uncomfortable? That should be something that's like, okay, I don't like the way this person touches my shoulder or holds my waist, or this person talks to me, or this person calls me on weekends. Like, I feel stressed about that. So when you're feeling stressed or when you're feeling uncomfortable, pay attention to those cues, because sometimes our body is giving us cues that this is a boundary that's being crossed, or this is a place you need to put a boundary because it is going to cause problems in the future. Number 2 is flows from the last part of number 1, which is pay attention to your feelings. There are 3 main feelings that get affected when boundaries are being affected. Number 1 is resentment, number 2 is discomfort, and number 3 is guilt. And those are very good feeling indicators. So you might feel resentful because every single time you're being asked to work beyond the time you're supposed to be working. You're supposed to be working 8 to 5, you're always being told to stay in the office until 7. Over time, because that's a boundary that you had 8 to 5 and people just keep pushing it and pushing it, you can start becoming resentful towards your boss or your supervisor, towards the organization, resentful towards your work, and that is an indicator that there's a boundary that has been ignored, or a boundary that has been overlooked, and therefore now that resentment starts building. Guilt, you might be in a situation at work, or you're being called to do something at work, and every time you do that thing, or every time you look at that thing, or every time you engage in a particular thing, you feel guilty. And that's another indicator that our bodies or our inner being is telling us, oh no, there's a boundary that's been crossed. So every time when you have any one of these 3, resentment, guilt, or discomfort, you want to rate that feeling. Is it at a 0 to 3 or what? Like not 0, obviously, if you're rating it, it's there. 1 to 3, like a 4 to 6, and a 7 to 10 when it's like really strong. Like I'm feeling very uncomfortable. I'm feeling very resentful. If it reaches the place 7 to 10, that means that boundary is either not there or it's completely destroyed. If it's 0 to 3 or 1 to 3, that means that the boundary is starting to be, you know, it's like a revving car. It's beginning to be tested, and you need to strengthen that. If it's at 7 to 10, you need to have a conversation again, either to establish a boundary or re-establish a boundary with clear communication and clear guidelines. Number 3 is that you need to know your value. Yesterday I put up a video on Instagram about assertiveness. Maybe I'll share it here as well, about assertiveness. And one of the things I talked about in the assertiveness video and how to build and grow in assertiveness, one of the things was about knowing your value. And that's so important here, guys. If you do not know your value, or you do not value yourself, you will not value your mental health, you will not value your physical health, you will not value your emotional and spiritual health, and therefore you will keep sacrificing and breaking boundaries, or people will keep breaking boundaries, and you will suffer or sacrifice your own well-being for the sake of the other people. But you need to know that you're valuable, your mental well-being is valuable, your peace of mind is valuable, your contribution is valuable, and therefore do not sacrifice, do not keep breaking your boundaries, or do not allow people to break those boundaries, because you are valuable. And if you're not well as a person, if you're not well as an individual, then you're not able to give anything anyway to the workplace, or anything anyway to whatever relationship that is. Number 4, you need to define what needs to be done. What are the boundaries that you want to be in place? You need to list them out and then begin to communicate them. Boundaries cannot just be in your head and in your heart internally. People cannot read your mind. If you're only working Monday to Friday between 7 and 6 p.m., people need to know it. So for example, if you are a boss, if you have people reporting to you, communicate it to your, I was going to say subjects, but that's not it. Communicate it to the people who report to you, okay? So communicate to them that if you want to reach me, if you want to schedule meetings, schedule them between this time and this time. These are the times that I'm available. On Saturday and Sunday, I'm not available. I'll respond to you then. If you have an email account, I think everyone has an email account now, then indicate in your email as well, available or working hours, office hours between XYZ to ABC. I don't know, I used 3 things, should be between X and Y. That's when you're available. So different things, and continue to communicate. In the video on assertiveness, I talked about being consistent in how you communicate. So don't say 7 to 6 today and then tomorrow you're saying 9 to 3 is when you're available, unless it's for different days. Be consistent in your communication. You put it in your email, you say it verbally, you communicate to suppliers, you communicate to team members that you're available between this time and this time. So make sure that that boundary is clearly, consistently and calmly communicated to other people. Number 5, another important thing that can help you with your work boundaries is to limit accessibility, okay? You are a person, an individual who is whole and full of value and full of awesomeness all by yourself. Before you got that job, and even after that job, you're still going to be awesome. And therefore, you cannot give your heart and soul. Even if you're running your own business, your whole being cannot be consumed by this job. And that kind of mentality of being consumed completely by your work is what usually opens the way for boundaries to be broken. So what I'm talking about is limiting accessibility. You do this by a number of things. Number 1 is by clearly setting boundaries and communicating them. Number 2 is having stipulated work hours. Guys, you can't be working from 6 to 6 every single day. You need to have hours that you work and hours and hours that you're not at work, and you need to stick by those. Sometimes the boundaries are broken not by other people, but they're broken by us. So you need to make sure that you keep those boundaries yourself, and you communicate to other people so they can keep those boundaries. A third thing that you can do there is not having your email, especially like your email, guys. Your work email should not be on alert on your phone unless you are a medical doctor, and even then you still need to take a break. But you should not have emails coming to your phone all the time, especially outside the window of the working hours. Another thing is this thing of overtime, guys. The jury is out about whether spending 30 million hours in the office every single day, working, clocking in overtime, leaving the office at 11 p.m. every single day and coming in at 5, whether that is actually the road to promotion and the road to success. Because let me tell you, my own position and point is that sometimes, yes, there are seasons where you might have to clock in overtime, you might have to work extra hours, but if that is the norm, one, you're sacrificing some other area of your life for you to be able to facilitate this extra hours. But two, it also communicates to me as your employer, or to the people who are making decisions about you, that you cannot do your work in the time allocated. Because there are people who come in at 9 and leave at 5, but their work gets done and they're still doing stellar work. So the whole thing about limiting accessibility, when you're consistently staying in the office way too late, you're coming in on weekends, then it trains your employer and trains the people that you work with to the boundary about work and home and your own personal time is not there. So it destroys that boundary. Okay, so you need to cut back down on always working and always being on and always just ready to just work at all times. Another thing is taking time off, taking a day off, taking leave. That's important, guys, because people need to be able to function when you're not there. People need to be able to respect your own time and to respect your need for recharging and rest. So that's another thing that helps with limiting accessibility. And last but not least, guys, is correcting people when they break a boundary or when they infringe on your boundaries or infringe on your space. You need to speak up as soon as it happens. Guys, I'm sure you know this by now. What you do not speak against, you tolerate. And therefore, because somebody has not been corrected when they have called you at 10 p.m. and maybe you accidentally picked up, or maybe your kid picked up, because sometimes my daughter picks up. Like, I'm just like, who is calling me at 10 p.m.? I know that your CV is important, but don't call me at 10 p.m. because this is my personal time. But my daughter will accidentally pick up the phone, and I will speak to the person, but at the end of that call, I'll be like, oh yeah, in future, please kindly don't call me after 7 o'clock. Please just call me before 7 o'clock or before 6 o'clock. So you can attend to whatever the situation is, but please reaffirm to them that, listen, my boundary is still there. We're still doing it that way. This is a once-off situation. And if they repeat, the next time, don't do it. Don't attend to what the request is, or don't make way for them to break that boundary again, because now it's a habit that's being created. So guys, I hope that has been helpful. I hope that your work boundaries will be strengthened and will be put in place if they have not been there, because guys, your well-being, your health, your wealth, and your ability to thrive in your workplace and your ability to thrive in relationships in the workplace is dependent on you having boundaries, because nobody can just be a doormat or can just be, you know, so hard on one end that you cannot accommodate people. But I find that many people are struggling with boundaries, so hopefully this has been helpful. Till next time, guys, bye.